This is the Horse Radio Network.
This is episode 828 of Horse Tip Daily. A different horse tip, a different equine topic, a different equestrian expert every day. Horse Tip Daily brings the world of equine knowledge to you, one day at a time. Hey horse folks, Coach Jen here, and thanks for tuning in to Horse Tip Daily. Today's tip is an excerpt from the Pro Riders Organization Eventing Radio Show. New Zealand eventer Dan Jocelyn joins show co-hosts Joe Meyer and Nate Chambers with some great suggestions about getting horses fit. And we'll get right to our fitness tip after this nutritional tip from Kentucky Performance Products. How is Summer Games different from other electrolyte products? Summer Games Plus contains the same electrolyte formulation as Summer Games Electrolyte, which was originally formulated for the horses competing at the 1996 Olympics. The formulation was based on the results of research conducted in anticipation of the Games, which were held in Atlanta, Georgia, known for its hot, humid summers. Summer Games mimics the composition of equine sweat, supplying the horse with the exact amounts and ratios of electrolytes relinquished in sweat. Summer Games Plus contains no sugar like many popular commercial electrolyte supplements. Summer Games Plus also contains a buffering agent that helps create a soothing gastric environment. This is especially important for horses subjected to the stresses often related to top performance, such as exertion, transportation, and unfamiliar stabling atmospheres. Ask for Summer Games and Summer Games Plus electrolytes at your local tack and feed supplier or visit kppusa.com. Now, on with today's tip.
We've also got a special guest on Nate and Joe's Tips this week, and it is my good friend Dan Jocelyn. He's Olympian, world champs, team rider, and genuine all-round cross-country superstar. Welcome to the show, Dan.
Hello, nice to be here.
So we want to just run through a little bit about what are we going to do with our beginner horses? Like, we're talking low levels. They don't have to go very fast. And what would be sort of the most important things that we've got to think about, Dan?
Well, the ones that I've got here that are starting at maybe the pre-novice level, stroke novice, would start with hill work and at the trot. And then they'd be building up to, we've got fabulous gallops over here in Newbury where I live. Up at Ian Balding's, and he's got a mild gel track. So they would canter up there, build up some hill work, and then they'd go up there and they'd go twice up that fairly quietly for the lower levels.
Yeah, and how often would you do that?
Oh, that would be once a week.
Once a week, yeah. So really, it's for the lower levels, it's not terribly stressful. They're probably thinking about more road work, more work inside the school.
Well, they haven't really learnt to gallop yet either, and it's just giving them confidence in a big canter and just letting them blow a bit and learn how to stay balanced. And, you're building them up with a bigger goal in sight. And you don't want to force any injuries upon them while they're still growing.
Yeah.
And what about some of the horses that are naturally a little bit heavier? Maybe not something that you've got as a young prospect that you're looking to gear up for, the upper levels at some point, but, maybe one of your clients' horses that, will be doing the lower levels for the majority of its eventing career.
I think the best thing for those horses is not to demoralize them by trying to go racing up the gallops like they're one of your fit eventers, because they can switch off quite easily. So therefore, I'd do a little bit more of the slower, steeper work with them, where they can just lollop along up a hill rather than too fast on a longer gallop on a bit of a rise.
And for us people down here in Florida and for other parts of the United States, that people that don't have hills, I'd probably suggest, some sort of interval training and starting off at, for the very low levels, 3 times 3 minutes, building up to 3 times 4.
Wow, exactly
5,
what we used to do in New Zealand. Yeah. Around a big field.
Around a big field, exactly. So,
well, we hope that answers a question.
Yeah, but moving on from this, I just want to, and this is one of the reasons why I got Dan on the show, just want to talk a little bit about more the higher level things. And Dan's mentioned the track that he has there at Ian Balding's, and I've ridden on that myself quite a lot of times. Dan and I were very lucky to be allowed to, we were practically given a massive big grass gallop to use as we wanted. And tell us, Dan, a little bit about how you'd prepare a horse you've had a couple of heavier horses, bigger horses, for that, for 4-star.
Well, I'm still guessing, but you're basically aiming to gallop them or give them a good strong canter every 4 days. Now that might be once a week with a competition at the weekend, or up the gallops once a week, and then on the other day, we'd again use the hills, which we're very fortunate to have here. And for the bigger horses that don't really work themselves that hard up the gallop, some horses, they just don't work themselves on the gallop, then we'd put another horse in front of them, and that draws them along a bit and just makes them work a bit harder without having to use their top speed. And again, that just saves their limbs a little bit, gives them a bit of incentive, and you can feel them really work a lot harder when they've got something to try and chase.
And I know the answer to this question, but how often would you go flat out?
If you're going to pay
save that for the show.
No, I'm on the Andrew Nicholson theory. If you're paying to use a gallop, then you might as well gallop.
Fair enough. Yeah, well, Andrew Nicholson seems to have horses that are in fairly good shape, as we've seen. So, but how does that, tell us a little bit about Silence, Dan. He was a small, thoroughbred horse, lightweight, super fast. What sort of work did you have to do with him?
Yeah, so he was a naturally very fit horse anyway, and he got fit on the smell of an oily rag. And his sort of did the same with him as what I do with all of them, but he was one that, as much as he was a dream to ride cross country and lovely in the mouth, whenever he got to the gallops, you couldn't hold one side of him. So unfortunately, he just went flat out every time he went up there. But it's, he still went till he was 20 and he never had a leg problem. So just a freakish sort of horse, I think. But generally, I try and be about 3/4 pace and let the rise and the gallop do the work. And, not use top speed that often. Yeah.
Okay, so you talk about every 4th day, and the day after the gallops, what are you going to tell people?
I just use the gallop as a normal part of their training. So the next day they would just go back and do some dressage, or they'd have a little jump. Sometimes it's good to jump a horse after you've galloped because it gives you a little bit more of a feel of what they're going to be like on the last day of a 3-day, depending on what you're building up for. And if you've got a fresh horse jumping, it's good to jump after a gallop. Or if you've got a horse that feels it a bit after a gallop, then maybe you'll just take it for a walk and let it recoup.
Yeah.
Every horse is different, but mainly the galloping is just a part of their routine. So the next day would be a normal sort of day, unless there's something specific you want to work on.
So Dan, thank you so much for coming on the show, and let us know where we can find you. What's your website, and where do we find you on Twitter?
On Twitter, it's Dan Jocelyn. And what is Dan Jocelyn Eventing?
.com?
Yeah. Something like that.
Something like that. I'm sure he won't be hard to track down.
I'm glad you know all your media outlets. It's very good.
Yeah. Good talking to you, fellas.
Well, we thank Dan very much for coming on to help us answer one of Nate and Joe's tips. This week it was about fitness, and we hope it was useful and helpful to you all. I thought we had a pretty good show put together this week, Joe, especially with all the excitement from out at Rebecca Farm.
Yeah, Rebecca Farm, I'm a little bit disappointed I wasn't there, but you can't go all the time, and I'm going to make a big effort to get up there next year. Thanks again to Dan, and I really liked his comments about not demoralising your horses. I don't think, I think that's an interesting thing and something for people to think about. And,
my favorite was, if the old Andrew Nicholson, if you're going to gallop.
You're paying. Exactly.
And that's a wrap. If you enjoyed Nate and Joe chatting about all things eventing, you can find them at eventingradio.com. Don't forget to support our sponsors here on Horse Tip Daily because they make these podcasts possible. Today's podcast has been brought to you through the generous support of Kentucky Performance Products. Ask for Kentucky Performance products like Summer Games at your local tack and feed supplier, or you can visit them online at kppusa.com. The Horse Radio Network and the Horse Radio Network hosts are not responsible for statements of guests or their opinions. Use your own judgment when listening to the tips provided by the experts on Horse Tip Daily.